Chairman, members of the panel, participants of the 6th International Conference on Social Science, Humanities and Technology, Sabah, Malaysia 2021. Good morning. I bring to you greetings from Universiti Kebangsaan, Malaysia and also Nigeria. The topic of my presentation this morning is on the topic Discourse on Historical Sources, Interpretation and Writing of History in Nigeria Today. This paper is co-authored by 3 authors. They are Joseph Bonglo Kingsley, myself, Sofian Mansour, Azlezan Matin. The work is divided into the following section: abstract, introduction, literature review, type of sources for the writing of history in Nigeria, the role of interpretation and writing of history in Nigeria, impact of interpretation and writing of history in Nigeria, and conclusion. The abstract focuses on the discourse on the sources and interpretation and writing of history in Nigeria. The paper analyzes the various sources. It analyzes the various sources and role of interpretation, the writing of history in Nigeria. The work, however, examines the various sources for writing of Nigerian history. It also looks at the role of interpretation by examining the responsibility of the historian in writing Nigerian history. It equally looks at the impact of the interpretation and writing of history in Nigeria. It makes use of the library method of research, which is predominantly centered on documented sources. The findings of this study reveals that we are majorly the primary and secondary sources is what was being used for the writing of history in Nigeria. It also found out that the historian was the sole determinant of historical fact, interpretation and writing of history in Nigeria, which has impacted significantly on the development of historical scholarship in Nigeria. Introduction. It is important to state here that history is deeply characterized by rudiment and procedures which a historian uses as a professional in carrying out his work. This has been rightly captured by Carl Baker in this statement. I quote, "The historian is concerned with events, acts, thoughts, emotions that have forever vanished as actual occurrences. He can deal with them because these vanished realities give place to pale reflections and palpable images or ideas of themselves, and these pale reflections and palpable images, which cannot be touched or handled, are all that is left of the actual occurrence. These are therefore what the historian deals with. These are his materials. He has to be satisfied with this for the very good reason that he has nothing else. unquote. From this statement of Carl Baker, 3 key elements could be identified. Number 1, the fact referred to as his materials. Number 2, interpretation described as he can handle them. Number 3 is the writing or documentation of history referred to as the historian is concerned with event, with thought, with emotions, and others. However, it should be noted that these 3 elements depend on the historian for a historical document to be processed or produced. A literature review. Actually, it is a known fact that history has been largely misconstrued by many, despite the fact that every phenomena has a history. Joseph Ittel identified that reasons for this are due to naivety, fear, lack of interest, forgetfulness of the important and unique type of knowledge that history actually gives. The reason is that the knowledge history gives always addresses this fundamental question: what, how, when, where, who, and why. For those involved in any phenomenon or history or event or makers of history do not always explain adequately what they are involved into, which makes it a responsibility of the historian to do the in-depth work of explaining what might have informed and shaped the event that the actors of history were able to make. However, even if they are involved in explaining the phenomenon, they cannot exhaust the in-depth of it, for each generation chooses its own meaning of history, not what has been actually handed over by the past generation. And therefore, any generation that fails to actually address this disconnect is spelled for doom. How does the historian goes about this work of resolving the disconnect or the gap? Vava noted that history, the knowledge of history, is set apart from other forms of knowledge. This is because history has some form of logic, method, and perspectives. Not only that, looking at the evolution of history has moved from being a mere discipline that narrates the event of the past to being analytical and scientific in its approach. This has made it possible for methodology to be enshrined as a vital part for training of historians, which makes it possible for historians to know how to identify their facts, where to identify those facts, how to go about the selection process, how to handle the challenges associated with the sources of the fact, and how to bring about a historical documentation. Now let's look at type of sources for the writing of history in Nigeria. There are basically 2 types of sources, the primary and the secondary sources. The primary sources are sources from the eyewitness of an event or an account, while the secondary sources are sources that have been documented by others or are received from those who were directly involved. However, primary sources are subdivided into oral evidence, archaeological evidence, linguistic evidence, geographical evidence. The secondary sources equally they comprise of the following. We have the NCBD, which are the local system of communication being used by people of the Niger Delta, the Nupe and other Nigerian languages. We have the second group being the Arabic script, which came to Nigeria around the 10th century, and we see it reflected particularly in the activities of the jihadis, who wrote extensively justifying their reasons for the jihad of the 19th century in the northern part of the country. The third source is the Roman script, which actually came through the coast and was brought about by the early European explorers, traders, and missionaries, and also by the colonial officers. Let's look at the second aspect, the third aspect, which is the role of interpretation and writing of history in Nigeria. However, it should be noted that the Nigerian historian has three key steps to take in actually writing the history of Nigeria. Number one is for him to obtain his sources. It is with these sources, which are his facts, that the Nigerian historian can go about the reconstruction or construction of Nigerian history. The second important step is for him to locate those facts. The facts are found in the sources of history, and these sources of history is either in the mind of the historian or in records or in documents. And these have made ICSHT to declare that facts do not speak, but the historian decides which one to give the floor to and in what order. The third step for a Nigerian historian is the selection, that's the interpretation and selection of facts. The interpretation and selection of facts is delegated by some basic principles. It has to do with how relevant those facts are in documenting a history and the strength of that very fact. The historian looks at all this before he does his work. We move to the last part, which is the impact of the interpretation and writing of history in Nigeria. The impact are this. Number one, first and foremost, it actually enriches our mind with multiples of images, of places, of ideas, of people, of emotions outside our personal experiences. Not only that, it influences the society, it influences the community, and also the course of event in the society. It also corrects the common wrong images in history. For instance, in the case of African history, Europeans came up with a wrong assertion that Africa did not have any history. But through more effort in developing history and Nigerian history, that wrong assertion has been debunked through that, thereby correcting the wrong image, which weakens the false facts that were not actually so. Therefore, in conclusion, it is very clear from the foregoing that interpretation and writing of history is linked to the sources of writing of history in Nigeria. Not only that, the Nigerian historian plays an overwhelming and dominant role in sourcing his facts, in creating his fact, in interpreting his fact and writing of the Nigerian history. This has greatly and significantly impacted on historical scholarship. Thank you.